Hi, everybody. This is Josh.
And this is Daniel with Quality Storage Buildings.
Today, we're talking about a very important topic, and that is 5 things you need to know before purchasing your DIY tiny house. So, this is an important topic because so many people are buying, a DIY tiny house where you get the shell and then you finish out the inside, and it's a great thing to do. It's quite cost effective, and it gives you that opportunity to customize some things and have the pride of doing the work yourself, which is pretty cool. But there are some really important things to keep in mind um, as you're doing the work on the tiny house, as you're preparing for it, as you're looking into purchasing one. And so much could be said here, right? So what we're talking about is just some really, preliminary first things to keep in mind. So there's much more that could be said, but we hope that this is helpful. So 5 things you need to know. First would be foundation prep. There's a couple different options that you can go with, and this is not to be a pun, but it's foundational to the work that you're doing on your building, and it can have long-term consequences, both either good or bad. So Daniel, talk to us a little bit, like what are some of the foundation options? What are some pros and cons?
Yeah, definitely consider your foundation. It's going to be the most important part, or one of the most important parts of the building project of your tiny home. You have 3 different options. The concrete blocks.
Right.
If you're doing concrete blocks, make sure they're every 8 foot on center minimum. Another option is gravel pads. Now you can do a gravel pad, do at least 4 to 6 inches compacted and leveled, and then you can block on top of the gravel pad to give yourself room to do your plumbing and what you need to do underneath. And then the third option is concrete. You can do concrete pad and block off of that, or use the concrete pad as your floor. Now, if you use the concrete pad as your floor, you're going to have to think about plumbing and everything, electrical, making sure that's all done when you pour the slab. And in the concrete pad, you could also do, if you use concrete piers. That's another good option. Now, make sure you consult with the building company that you plan to use, and make sure that you have the schematics of how to do the piers.
Right. Yep. Yeah, because the last thing you want is for them to put the piers up, and then the company brings the building and you find out that the timber skids are off and it's not set on your piers. So it's really important that you check on those details and you collaborate with whatever company you're talking to for that building. So definitely some pros and cons there. Decide, what you want. Maybe your budget is such that you can only do the blocking and leveling. That's okay. Just keep in mind the logistics. Make sure your ground is good, it's solid, is cleared. Maybe gravel pad is something that you can do. That's great. It's definitely better than blocking.
And the size definitely plays into that. So if you're getting a 640 square foot building, 640, definitely I'd highly recommend putting down a gravel pad and then doing the concrete blocks on top.
Yep. And then even larger than that, if you're going up to 18 by 60 or, whatever, like you're really going to want to make sure that your foundation is as good as it can possibly be. So make sure you do your research, make sure you think through where the building is going to be placed, the ground type, the plumbing, all of those different things are going to play into the type of foundation that you do. Second, the second thing that you should know is the structural components and what makes a good and bad, just overall shell for a tiny house that starts off the basic structure. So Daniel, talk to us a little bit about that. Like what are the most important things? Again, there's a lot of things we can talk about. But what are like some of the key things that people should be looking for when they're looking for a structurally quality tiny house?
Yeah, so some things to keep in mind is starting off with the floor. Are the skids underneath, are they 4x4s or are they 4x6s? I'd highly recommend the 4x6s, especially if you're going at a decent size.
Right.
And then 2x6 floor joists. Highly recommend that. Make sure those are every 16 inches on center. You want a very sturdy floor. The wall framing, make sure that's all 16 inches on center. Those can be 2x4s. And then think about your doors and windows. Make sure they're insulated. Double pane windows. Make sure the windows are nice. And then the other part is like, what do you plan to do as far as finish out? Think about how you're planning to do that. If you're needing extra wood put in, dead wood, triple studded corners. That's some things to consider. And you can do metal or the LP Smart siding. Those are the two common
Mm-hmm.
siding types you run into.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the LP Smart siding is a 50-year warranty.
Mm-hmm.
You can get the 3/8 or 7/16 in thickness.
Mm-hmm.
I'd highly recommend for, if you're going 16 by 40 or bigger or even smaller than that, make sure you get the 7/16.
Right.
That's a really,
Mm-hmm.
really small thing to pay attention to, but it does help provide the structural integrity of the
Mm-hmm.
building over the longevity.
Yeah, it's an
years.
extra bit of thickness that's very beneficial.
And then another part is the roof. You can do shingles or metal.
Mm-hmm.
Metal's going to last a lot longer for the
Mm-hmm.
roof. And make sure you have radiant barrier in there as well. That's a really nice feature.
Mm-hmm.
You can do regular OSB or radiant barrier. Radiant barrier is an
Mm-hmm.
OSB with a silver backing on it.
Yep.
So that radiates heat off the building and keeps your building cooler.
Yes.
Even if you plan to insulate it, it helps out quite a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. So these are some really important things to keep in mind. And one other thing that I would say about the metal siding is if you're going to do metal siding, which a lot of people do like to go the metal siding route, which is fine. But something really important to keep in mind is it needs to have OSB on the back.
Yeah.
Like if it's going to be quality, it needs to have OSB. And keep in mind that when you're using metal, the metal will condensate.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have moisture. You're going to have an element of moisture to be concerned about and to be cautious about that you wouldn't really have with wood. So it's not to say that it's completely out of the question. It's just there's a lot more precautions that you have to take when you're doing like a metal siding.
Yeah, and with the LP siding, you can paint it to whatever color you want. You can,
which is
the trim
very
colors,
nice.
the doors, the shutters.
Mm-hmm.
If you get shutters on your tiny house,
Exactly.
that's definitely a nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great feature. Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you do your research on the structural components of whatever building you're going to get, and make sure you're getting something quality that's going to last you for a long time. The third element that we want to talk about is the insulation types of, when you're insulating your building. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty important. It can be, maybe it seems a little bit of a small issue, but it's important. So Daniel, what are the insulation types, commonly speaking? What are some pros and cons?
Yeah, so the two most common that I have a lot of clients ask me about is spray foam and batting insulation.
Yes.
Now, batting insulation is going to be your most economical choice.
Mm-hmm.
You go pick it up at Lowe's or Home Depot and install it yourself. It's really easy to install.
Yeah, and it's pretty cheap too.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap too. So that's going to be a really common choice. Another really common choice is spray foam, and that's really, really nice. Except the only con to that is you have to have someone come out and spray it.
Yeah, right.
But overall, it seals off your building, provides nice insulation, heat and cooling is really economical as far as that. So it saves on the longevity as far as heat and cooling your cabin.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the couple of options. Maybe one other con to the spray foam would be that it's generally more expensive.
Yeah.
So like if you have a tight budget, you may need to go with a batt insulation. Yeah. It's not going to be as good as a spray foam would be, but it will suffice if that's your budget.
Yeah, another option on the flooring as well for insulating the floor, spray foam works great for that.
Right.
Closed cell.
Yep. And that is another benefit with the spray foam is that you have the ability and capacity to do the floor as well as the inside walls and ceiling.
And one thing on the spraying the floor, if you have the building company do that beforehand, like lift it up off the ground high enough for them to get underneath and spray, that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be kind of a preliminary thing to decide maybe before you would have the building brought to your property. So that's just a really quick overview of the insulation. Again, so much more could be said there about the ins and outs of those different types of insulation. But again, we hope that exposes you to some of the basic types and maybe some of just a couple pros and cons to those. The fourth thing that you need to know is the electrical and plumbing. And we've touched on this kind of briefly, but what are just some key things to keep in mind when it comes to the electrical and the plumbing?
Yeah, I would definitely hire it out if you're not experienced in plumbing and electrical. It's one of those things that if you get a professional in there and get it done for you, it'll be done right. And make sure you do it before the spray foam if you're going to spray foam or even insulation. I get that asked all the time. It wants to spray it before it comes out.
Right.
And that's one thing you have to have done before, and then you can insulate it afterwards. So just make sure you get the steps in a row when you're doing the finish out.
Yeah, and that's super important. And like we said earlier in the video, if you're doing a concrete pad, just keep in mind that your plumber needs to get the plumbing done if the building is going to be set if you're going to have a concrete floor, if you're blocking and setting the building on top of the slab, that's a little bit of a different story. But if you're going to have a concrete floor, you don't forget that step, because your plumbing has to go into the slab when it's poured, so that when whatever company builds onto that slab, it's ready to go, and they can just come in and finish off the plumbing side of it. So those are just two really important things to think about when it comes to the electrical and the plumbing side of it. The last and the fifth thing that you should know is the different wall types when it comes to finishing out. So Daniel, talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, and this is a fun part about finishing out your own cabins. You can really, or tiny house, you can really choose how you want to finish it out. The three common ones I hear is paneling. That's really common. You get the 4x8 panel sheets from Lowe's or Home Depot or your local hardware store, and just put up the paneling. And you can paint it depending on what kind of paneling you get. And then another option is pine board. The 1x6 pine board. That's another really nice option. It's actually on the back of our video right here. So that's a really nice option as well. And then the third option is sheetrock. Sheetrock is really common as well. It's used in a lot of houses. The downside of that, if you ever want to move your tiny house down the road, later have the moving company come in and move it for you, there's chances of it maybe cracking potentially. But that's a really nice option as well. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot more could be said about just the overall finishing of a tiny house. There's just so many different pieces that goes into that. So some of what we've gone over today is really just the base level things as you're getting the ball rolling, just some preliminary things to keep in mind. And we hope it's been helpful for you, and it can be a resource for you as you're continuing the process of working on your tiny house. So we hope you've enjoyed this video. We hope it's been helpful for you. If it has, subscribe, like this video, share it with someone if you think it'd be helpful for them. And we would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So if you're looking at a house and you might have some questions, reach out to us via call or text at 254-687-9209. And one of our consultants would be more than happy to help answer any questions that you have. Thanks so much for watching. We hope you have a great day.